Hi students, welcome to this lecture on the nature of subjectivity in yoga, the nature of the individual path towards yogic understanding. As you know, this course is structured around a set of biographies, the kind of unfolding of a particular moment in the life of Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra when he is about to battle his brothers. The story of Anna Forrest, a modern-day yoga teacher who's still living, who has become prominent on the kind of star circuit, modern star circuit of yoga, and has her own style. And the story of Paramahansa Yogananda, which is an iconic story in the modern age. It's brought many people to sympathy with yoga practices and yoga ideals because of the profundity of his experiences and the kind of iconic nature of his experiences, because he was Indian. He had early premonitions when he was young that he would be a man of the cloth, we might say, a man of sacred understanding. And he also, of course, had important gurus, which is the traditional kind of storyline that we imagine when we think of someone becoming a yogi. He had very powerful gurus, which came from a very powerful lineage, and that lineage power was bequeathed to him, and he became the liege holder of it. He became the living embodiment of it, especially after 1936 when his guru Sri Yukteswar died. And that's kind of a traditional path, traditional biographical path. But when you read the book, you'll find it very fascinating because it's a very dramatic story. But what I want to say about this kind of wider ambit of yoga biography and how it relates to yoga itself is that yoga activates the subjective sense. And in my experiencing, I feel like few things are more important now for the kind of social conversations that are happening in our country today. We're so mired in a set of quote-unquote objectivities which are opposed to one another. Democrat, Republican, right, left, black, white. And our capacity to penetrate through a set of projections around the opposite tribe, who we think they are and who we think we are, is very much encumbered by a basic assumption that we see objective reality. What yoga teaches us is that our reality is profoundly subjective, and it isn't only subjective in that it's flawed. It's subjective in that the path through subjective experience, the path through your own personal way of seeing, which is what subjective means rather than seeing along with the group, is the path to true objectivity. It's only by wiping away our particular subjective mirror, our particular personal set of projections. Projection is a psychological term, which means I don't really see reality, but my old patterns and neuroses determine what I see. They project onto reality what is not necessarily there. It might be there, but it just as well might not be there. It's just my pattern of seeing. So in this story of these yoga biographies, we encounter conversations by three main protagonists, and we see their perceptible limits. In the case of Anna Forrest, she's very frank about talking about what she knew and did not know. In fact, we actually also get quite a bit of that with Paramahansa Yogananda, and even in this ancient text of the Bhagavad Gita, we get it with Arjuna as we see his consciousness, his awareness shift. But what I want to point to in all three of these stories is that we always begin with this, as what Newton called the sensorium, with these five senses. These are the gates. In the yoga tradition, we call them the indriyas, and they're actually spoken of as gates, the gates of perception. There was a famous book in the 1930s called The Gates of Perception by Aldous Huxley. When he started to explore the Eastern traditions, he used that term as kind of his banner for describing the process of clearing away those gates of perception, of cleaning those gates of perception. A very common metaphor that we encounter in the meditation traditions is that the mind is like a mirror, and it's befouled, it's dirty, it's besmirched, it's covered with dust. And meditation is a process of wiping the mirror clean so that it can accurately reflect the nature of reality. And that, in a nutshell, is what the yoga path is about. I mention in passing in my syllabus that it's about encountering the now. That's another way of looking about it in terms of the time-space continuum. It's about teaching ourselves to be right here and now in our everyday, our quotidian. Quotidian is a fancy word which means everyday. Our everyday experience. Being right here in this eternal experience of the now. And the way we come into that, into a crisp dynamic, what the tantric traditions call tessellated way, where the presence of reality vibrates with all of its true, profound life force, is to make the apparatus of the mind and the body clear so that all of what is in reality has a capacity to come in. The mind is a kind of filtering activity. It emphasizes certain things. It prevents other things from coming in. It's selective in its awareness. That's what we mean when we say subjective. It's one of the meanings of what subjective is. But yoga, in its initial phase of working, attempts to wipe away that base subjectivity, that simple subjectivity, and to amp up the capacity, amp up the particular subjective apparatus, your own individual capacity for seeing, so that you can see better, you can see more clearly, you can see with more unbroken focus. And in the yoga tradition, many of the practices we do have to do with not breaking focus, with keeping the eyes from blinking, staring at a yantra, which is a diagram, and even that process of staring at the diagram brings information into us. But the capacity to just see without blinking, see without letting the mind shift, is a healthy practice for allowing all of that subjective material that we're always projecting on outside of us to sort of turn back and come into our field of awareness. If I am prevented from putting onto the outside world what I think it looks like, or thinks it's doing, or think it intends, because of my own traumas and patterns. And trauma is a big word, neurosis is a big word, but actually our whole mental structure is structured by our patterns, by what the yoga tradition calls samskaras, by what we have seen before. If I can somehow work with that, if I can somehow see the space between perception and response, if I can start to open that up, clear that out, then I come into a subjective experience of reality, a merely personal experience of reality, but one which is profoundly informed by reality, not by what we call consensus consciousness, not by some tribal set of ideas, some democratic set of ideas, a Republican set of ideas, or white set of ideas, or black set of ideas. Not something that's particular to my tribe in any way, my ethnicity, my politics, my values, but something that's extremely clear and crisp. And it's difficult perhaps to even imagine that we can see something that is not through the skein of our own personality and personal experience. But that's what yoga promises at its ultimate place. You transcend mundane subjectivity, your mundane personal way of seeing, and you come into a personal way of seeing which has a relationship to the universal consciousness, which of course is unmediated, unprejudiced, without filter. So these subjective stories that we encounter provide models for us all. I'm about 1 minute short of ending this lecture, and I know that I lose the video if I don't end it in time. But to just say that, and they provide models for us to move forward in our own lives, in our own personal drama stories, biographies, toward that deeper objectivity that comes from clarifying the gates of perception. And we'll speak more on this subject in the future. Thanks for listening.